Thank you for coming. My name's Simon. I'm actually not from this institution, so I'm an interloper today, but I've been asked to chair this. So it's been a great pleasure to introduce this session, particularly on a subject which is, for me, such an elusive thing to understand. I've been in higher education for a long time, despite the fact I look so young. I've never quite understood what excellent teaching is. On very occasional moments, I think fleetingly I might have achieved it, and then I've regularly brought back to realise that no, I haven't. So I'm looking forward to finding out from Pam and the team what it might be, but I think she might be letting us to find that out for ourselves a bit before she then tells us perhaps what it might be. There's a little bit of a hint, I think, maybe in front of you, but I'll be quiet and shut up now and hand over to Pam.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the session. Yes, and Simon is right. There is actually going to be some activity from you as well. Firstly, just to say, although I'm standing here at the front as the person leading the project at present that we have, James is in the room as one of our members. Having a student on this project is really important. And the other people who are part of the Change Academy project team are Julie Attenborough, who's the Associate Dean Education for Health. We've got Maggie Cunningham, who comes from Academic Services and is Development Support Manager. And then we've got Wayne Holland as well from CAS as Associate Dean for Education, so that we can try and represent areas across the university. So they're all unable, or some of them were unable to be here, but James and I will do our best to get you through the session. So part of the background to this is that recognition and reward of teaching excellence has been a subject of interest for a long time. There are quite a few people who write about it. The National Teaching Fellowship Scheme was started back in 2000 and is one of the things that people have used to try and identify what are seen to be excellent teachers, although that scheme does vary quite diversely now. And most institutions do have their own award schemes, as we do here. We have school awards, we have the Student Voice Awards, but we also then have some different awards that people might be running, and we run development projects too. Some of the criticisms of the schemes are, though, that people aren't very clear about the criteria. Some of you might feel within your own schools it's not always transparent. And people feel that perhaps we should be looking a bit more at that and looking at what teaching excellence might be. So there are some people who write quite a lot, and these references are on the slides, which we will make available at the end of the time when we've got the conference website up for you. But somebody called Alan Skelton writes quite a lot about teaching excellence and has just published a new book, 2013, with a view about that across Europe as well as here and America. So there is still quite a lot of people looking at it. We were interested here when the Change Academy call was put out from the Higher Education Academy. They do these Change Academies sometimes once or twice a year, and last year they put one out in around August, which was focused on recognising teaching excellence. And we felt that would be really important for this institution, partly because we do have an award scheme that's been running quite a while, and we felt that maybe it was a time to review it. But also, people are aware, some people think that maybe research is given a higher priority, and we wanted to make sure that teaching was seen the same. So with support from David, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, David Bolton, we got support to apply for this. And the idea of the Change Academy is that it's a cross-institution project, and that we use the time to think about, not just from the centre, the Learning Development Centre, how we might develop this, but how we can look at it within different schools, across different disciplines, and that we can also think about different types of teaching, because we know that people do online teaching, they do face-to-face. We have a lot of visiting lecturers, we have a lot of people coming in from industry, so it isn't just about people who are trained as teachers. And the project's a year long, so we're about 6 months into the project, I think now. Yeah, we've had a midpoint meeting and things, and some of you might think, I've not heard anything about this so far. We have got a blog about the project that you can visit and join in and contribute to, but we thought today was a good opportunity to be looking at some of this. Some of the other reasons for participating in this is that obviously the university has a not so new vision. It was 2012 to 2016, but some of the things that were in that vision around the education theme were how important it was to support and encourage staff in pedagogical innovation and in education development, but also that we recognise excellent staff performance and that we find some way of capturing that and sharing really good practice. So that's why we felt it was timely to do the project. As I said, we want to review our award scheme because we know that it's changed over a period of time, but we do know that maybe people aren't entirely clear about the awards, how they're given, whether or not they're given in every area of the university. We want to look at a clear progression route for staff against the UK PSF, which is the Professional Standards for University Teaching. And although we do have within our MA programme, we've already got approval for Associate Fellowship and Ordinary Fellowship of the Higher Education Academy, we have a programme running for Senior Fellows, but not everyone's clear about those routes, who it applies to and who it doesn't. And we want to provide some much clearer guidance on the website about that. And we've been running a development route for the National Teaching Fellows that we started again about 3 or 4 years ago. So we wanted to look at a way of bringing all that together. So we probably set ourselves quite a lot to do in the year-long task, but we're moving along all right. Now, what we did want to do is for the workshop, we don't actually want to share the results. We do have some, we're going to share that, but we don't want to share them before we get your ideas. Otherwise, you might just tell us what we've already been told. But we will share with you some results where we've done some work already with over 50 students, and we've already done some work with fellows. So the idea of this part, and the reason you're now sat at tables with tablecloths, and anyone who's not, I'm going to get you to move in a minute, is we want you to spend a bit of time thinking about these areas, and you will get to move around the room. This definitely isn't you just sitting still. What we want you to do is to think about the questions that you've got on your table, and we're going to time you so that you have to move for 10 minutes at the first table. And what we want is everyone to think about the topic that's on the table. You can draw pictures, you can write just notes, you can put anything you want on there. And then we want one person to volunteer to feed to the next group when you move round, and that person can then move round after, but just to give the next group a flavour so they're not having to read everything on the tablecloth. That's why your time gets shorter. So you've got 10 minutes at your first cloth, 7 minutes at your second one when you move round, and then 5. And can, wherever you are at the last point, somebody volunteer to just feed back the highlights to the rest of the group before we share with you. So the 3 tables that you've got what is teaching excellence, you've got one about how should we assess it, and then there is one about how should we recognise and reward it. So it's about what do you think it is, how do you think we can assess that, what sorts of things we should be looking for, and I can tell you then what others have said, and how do you think that we should recognise, reward this, what should we do when we do identify people who are good teachers. So it's over to you, and I'm going to do my timing. And anyone who's not at tablecloth, just join one of the others. There's plenty of pens on there. 12. 12. 22.
Thinking you could look at health, you could look at business,
You've got 3 more minutes on these tables, so you need to also decide who's going to give a quick overview to the next group when you shuffle.
Which is what you were saying. Yeah, standards that students can feel reassured.
Okay, I'm going to make you all move round the room now. If I make you move clockwise, that probably makes more sense. Clockwise, Annie. Annie. Clockwise. Annie. Annie. Clockwise. Clockwise. Clockwise.
Who's clock?
Clockwise. Going this way. So that table's coming over here. I just wanted to see how many people could get round the room, Andrew. Yeah, can one person just stay on each table to just give a recap and then move? That just saves them having to read everything, because you're only going to get 7 minutes at this table. Has everyone moved all right? So that table should be going to there. The group that were there should be going there. And you went that way.
It's Pictionary, basically.
Right, I'm going to get you to move for the last time now. So again, can we go clockwise? And if one person can just give a quick...
No.
Okay, you're suggesting this to the student. What do they think after that?
I'm going to stop you. Gonna stop you all. Sorry. Right. Okay, if I can get each table just to feed back some key points on these areas, and then we'll share with you the data we've got. Yeah, do have you see. So we've got what is teaching excellence, which I think is the table here. If you want to just share some of the key points from the tablecloths. Anyone?
I think one of the things we discussed as being quite important is what the students would consider to be teaching excellence. And we were saying, I think sometimes there are discussions concerning the student experience that don't actually involve the students. We were saying sensitivity to accessibility and inclusivity, innovation, and they're all the ones I can read from this orientation.
Subject-specific skills, aggressive thinking,
Okay.
engaging, interest motivating.
One of the other things that's come up is that that it appears to be looking at the sort of top 10%, the people that are doing everything very, very well, whereas there's 90%, that's not being discussed here. And I think, you could get some teachers that might not be excellent across the board, but some of what they do is excellent. They just might not be considered in that top 10% unless they're doing it across the board, but it shouldn't be disregarded, the bits that they are doing very well.
Yeah, and that was a really good point. I know I joined in discussion on a table where they were saying, is excellence really what we want? When actually most teachers, do provide really good teaching, and are we missing those teachers? Do we need to actually not think about it being teaching excellence? What is it we want to look at and define and not disregard those other people? Okay, so moving on, how should we assess this then? So I think that's the table there. How are we going to know what good teaching is then?
Okay, so we had quite a lot to start off with, and only a few survived the cut, really. So the ones that we agreed that we like were things like peer observation, making sure that this happens, within a department, but also interdisciplinary, maybe also cross-institutional peer observations. Self-assessment being really important, reflective practice being a huge part of it, perhaps referring back to the UK PSF in your own practice. Some ones that caused a bit of debate, perhaps, things like student feedback. So yes, important to get the student feedback, but doing it in the right way, making sure we get qualitative feedback and not just, this is just score out of 5 or something like that. So really important to get that. Perhaps, formal and informal feedback then. And you suggested, having kind of events where you discuss the students' experiences as opposed to getting them to fill out a form or something. But you mentioned, do you want to talk a bit about the employability part of it that you mentioned?
Yeah, about this assessment, one of the things we wanted to do is to see how employable they are, because someone can have an excellent results and they like the teaching, but are they actually employable outside? And so able to actually apply the skills into the diverse environment, so they learn the theory and how they can actually apply that. So that need to be put in, because at informatics we have this professional pathway and placement scheme. So we wanted to see that as an indicator factor or KPI in a way.
Okay.
So teaching that's fit for purpose.
Fit for purpose, yeah, because we actually learn all the skills and technologies, but when you really go out in Silicon Valley or Silicon Valley, you don't have that kind of resources. So they should be able to apply what's best for that environment. So we'll be talking to the employers and alumni.
Okay. All right, thanks very much. And then the last group, so what are we going to do? Once we've actually worked out who are these excellent teachers, how are we going to reward or recognise them in any way? Anyone?
In the long term, we might make them an emeritus professor. We might name a bench after them.
Right. Name a bench, there's an idea. We've got a park.
Well, I think aside from financial reward, which obviously we would all like, but obviously this isn't solely about that. Other things that were raised were time for sabbaticals or for going to conferences, and perhaps ones coming under the banner of CPD, not just training, but giving the rewardee a choice in, so it could be something that they wanted to do that was to do with educational development.
Opportunities.
Yeah,
Okay.
opportunity.
And making the students aware, maybe by even just an annual email, to say that these teachers have been thought to be good by you and by us, and doing something to give to reassure the students, and that could kind of have a snowball effect, that they'll have confidence in us and.
Okay.
There's also, I mean, it seems silly, but if we've recognised it and if we've rewarded it, then maybe also part of that recognition and reward is to actually try and share it. Try to capture those particular experiences and bring them on. What you have as a value, and you want to bring that to the rest of the institution.
And that in itself is an acknowledgement by your peers and students alike. So that would be a morale boost.
Okay, well thank you all very much for your contributions. I will now share with you some of the data we've collected, and I think one or two tables have made the point, should we not be asking the students? And in fact that is what we did to start with, right at the beginning of the project. Our project started in December, and so the first thing, James and I, along with a couple of other people, trawled the corridors of the main university at lunchtime, trapping people, and we asked students to provide us with answers to two questions, really, a bit like I've asked you all to do today when you were given a questionnaire. So the first one was, what do they think makes a good teacher? So we've got the wordle there of the things that they said, but the data that they gave us comes under three main areas, which are the attributes of the teacher, and they were very clear. It was about someone being passionate, inspiring them, taking an interest in them, but they could tell who were the really excited, interested teachers. The second area was about the teacher's role, and again that sort of bordered on some of those attributes. It was about teachers engaging them, it was about teachers spending time with them in class, and it was about the way they interacted and didn't just talk at them in the classes, and they got them involved in group work. And then the third thing was about the teacher-student relationship, and that they felt that those teachers that were the best teachers were the people who made them feel that they were important, that they were partners in learning, that there was a relationship, and that the teacher, again, wasn't just talking at them. So there's a bit of overlap.
Was there any context around outside of the classroom as well, so maintaining that relationship beyond classroom time and being accessible?
Some of them mentioned some of the things like that, and I'm going to move on to the next bit about that, but some of it was about accessibility and things, yeah, and certainly. Although obviously we do occasionally in the Student Voice Award data, which James and the Student Union are analysing for this year at the moment, occasionally we get random emails about people being available, all night and all day, and that's clearly not what we necessarily want people to do. The second question we asked them is what do staff do that helps students learn? And as you can see, we did another Wordle there, and Moodle is right there. And that wasn't because they just like Moodle or the fact the slides are on there. What they were saying was, they did like the fact now that people were using Moodle and that they were using it to put information on. But the themes that came out here were around providing information. So they liked the fact that the reading lists were there. They liked the fact that there were videos there. They liked the fact that there was an opportunity to have discussions with tutors. Engaging activities, again, they felt was really important that tutors spent time talking to them and that they used face-to-face time to actually have interaction and not just stand and talk at a group of students. And the third thing they said that was really important about teachers was that they inspired them to go off and do the learning, and that they didn't give them all the answers, and that was really important to them as well. So it was really good data we got to start the project from the students, and we'll probably have to try and trap a few more at the beginning of the next academic year. We then had 21 Learning Development Fellows, so they're people who've spent a bit of time doing either teaching projects or they've been on the MA, but we ran an event with someone externally to come and facilitate it for us. And again, we looked at three key areas. So we asked them what were the general characteristics for teaching excellence. So some of the things they came up with are similar to you. They talked about engaging students, making students curious and challenged. And again, the students said they wanted to be challenged. They don't want us to actually provide them with everything. Leading into independent learning, giving students confidence. An opportunity for students to grow was really important as well. And many of the lecturers realised that was important to the students. Then we made them do something awful, which is why you've got a competition today. We were all made, the external made, all of us in the room, draw what we thought teaching excellence in our own discipline looked like, which was really hard. Most of us found that we had a bit of a problem with that. Anyway, many people did very well. So we had people drawing a conveyor belt of tools, and they had, like, you know, those workmen who have a waste and lots of tools in them for different things they were going to do with students. Some of these pictures can be seen on the blog that we've got about the teaching project. Somebody else was a gardener, and they had seeds and they were watering them and nurturing the students and growing, which was really good. Somebody else had done a beautiful woven tapestry, and they turned it into, like, knowledge, attitudes and skills, but it was a really nice picture. Somebody else in the room managed to use the pod and found the clip from Dead Poets Society. Have you all seen Dead Poets Society? Where he had actually been sacked as a teacher, and the students had some really boring lecturer in the room, and they then all stood on the desk and were marching, and they said that they felt that was a really, you know, for them, quite a significant inspirational moment, and the sorts of things they would want teachers to do. And then the last bit was about somebody thinking about all aspects. Somebody who had was teaching around an area that was very industry driven as well. So they talked about, the picture had a bit about being in an office, being out on site, as well as being in class. So they were all very different pictures, and we did manage to engage in it, although we all found it quite hard. So that is a competition running today, you see, until the I think it's the 10th of June. You've got to get your pictures in if you want to enter this. We did look at how we would assess teaching excellence that day, and again we did this in groups. And some of us felt that it was quite important that actually, if we're going to assess teaching excellence or good teaching or whatever we call it, that it was seen to be as equal to research. And people were quite concerned that it wasn't seen to be second class, which people still think teaching is sometimes. So we looked at some of the areas that are used to assess research, and we looked at the fact that you could have peer review, which we know research is peer reviewed. We know we have internal, we can have external, and certainly your groups mentioned that. We looked at the different outputs that teachers could have. So we know that for researchers it's often their articles and their conferences, and we recognise teachers can go off and actually do that about the teaching they're doing, but teachers produce an enormous amount of materials for their courses, don't they? Course documents, things they put on Moodle, videos and things, and we don't always recognise that that also demonstrates some of their teaching expertise. So we felt that we could do some of that, as well as things like student satisfaction and assessment results. Impact, we wanted to look at case studies of impact where students said, you know, that teacher really had an impact on me, a bit like some of the Student Voice Awards do, because it made me do X, Y and Z, or without that teacher I wouldn't have given up, or this is what's made me get that job. So they felt that we could do some of that by going to alumni and current students and getting case studies. And the employability issue that you mentioned's come up. Income. Quite often research has talked about all that money it brings in. Look at all the money the teaching brings in. Though, you know, our students are bringing in a lot of money in fees in different ways. Teachers generate, as you know, more than they do from the research funding. We don't always acknowledge that. Knowledge transfer we thought was also important, because although teachers think they don't transfer knowledge, they do, not just to their students, but we share it with each other. We need to do more sharing for really good practice. But we, you know, it is about how we mentor junior staff and how we share that expertise and transfer that knowledge. Esteem, we talked about things like the National Teaching Fellows and awards schemes, but we also talked about things like fellowships. We've got a Learning Development Fellowship scheme here. We've got the external things like the HEA, so there are lots of ways that we can do that. And then the last thing was there was some discussion about environment and whether we could look at things like academic leaders who work within departments where they're leading groups of staff and taking things forward. So we did have quite a few different areas where we thought maybe we could look at some match between assessing. You know, and certainly your contributions will be very helpful today, because we're trying to build up a sort of case that we can use here at City. What are we going to do next? Well, we've also run the MA Academic Practice Programme that teachers do undertake to develop their teaching, and in fact many staff beyond us teachers do the programme. We ran a survey and we did ask a question about teaching excellence, so we've had 39 responses to that. We haven't yet had time to analyse that data, but again, on a quick look, some of it reflects some of the things you've said about engaging, inspiring, making students curious. 17 of those people have volunteered to be interviewed, and so we're hoping over the next few weeks to start doing interviews so that we can get a bit more about what teaching excellence is, as well as around the programmes. There is a questionnaire that we've hopefully handed to all of you today to get some more information, and the competition, and of course the workshop today. So we will be sharing this and building up. We do have a blog site though, which is on the bottom of your questionnaire. which you'll notice doesn't have loads on it, but if anyone wants to contribute any thoughts, you want to carry on that debate, do join in on the blog, because James and I have put a few things on there from events we've been to, but we are trying to make, teaching excellence and a bit more recognition of it around the university. So if there's things you want to contribute, do that. Has anyone got any questions? Those are all the references.
Will the presentation, will that be on?
Yes, we will. All the stuff from the conference, probably next week we'll start doing that, because they're filming things as well. So all of these things will be available for people too.
Which site? HEA? Or
No, it'll be on our learning development website. Yeah.
Can I ask maybe a stupid question, because I was in a bit late, I'm delusional with illness. But what are the outputs from this? What are the estimated kind of outward push?
What we're hoping to do is, well, there's a few things we're hoping to do as a result of this project. We're hoping to try and get some sort of definition for us as an institution of either good teaching or teaching excellence. Now we've had that debate, that we might want to put on the website. We're hoping to get some more information about the award scheme and look at the award scheme. It's been running here in the university for 13 years, and we know that schools are all doing it slightly differently. Some schools have got a very good scheme running with very clear criteria, other schools don't, and we want to try and match that, because there is a lack of transparency that staff feel, that needs to be clearer. The Vice-Chancellor wants to be able to recognise annually excellent teaching at graduation, at least one for each school, and so we need some criteria and things that can be done, so we're hoping to do that. And we're also going to use this to feed into the MA programme and the teaching programme that we run. Have I forgotten anything?
No, just in terms of the work I'm doing with the Student Voice Awards, so we had about 300 nominations for staff this year, so part of the process we're doing is we're going through that data. I think we're going to try and develop a sort of, Birmingham have a really good piece of work called the Birmingham Academic. I think we want to establish something similar in terms of, the city academic will come up with something different, so I'm completely stealing their idea.
Inspiring, not much.
Yeah, it's best practice, isn't it? Just develop that idea and actually, because I think what's symptomatic here is that we have great teachers, we have excellent teachers, and we're not good enough at getting people to recognise that. It was one of the most harming things about the Student Voice Awards this year was actually people being so shocked that they were valued by students for teaching. It's like it's become a dirty word, maybe.
Really? Well, oh gosh, it's a big thing, so I probably shouldn't say this, but the institutional strategy is very much about research.
Yeah,
do you think, being back and taking what you said this morning, Judge, right at the very beginning of today, and what some of the things you said today, is actually separating it into teaching and research and keeping that delineation maintains a problem. Whereas actually, if you looked at it as the academic, or whatever role you want to call it, so there are things in there which are common to both.
Yeah.
It's about, as you said this morning, it's about learning. A good teacher probably is somebody who continues to learn. It's about inquiry. Whether you're doing research or whether you're doing teaching, it's about stimulating thinking. It's about dissemination. And I wonder sometimes some of the things we talked about, we actually keep and maintain, which at certain, I can't comment on the city, but at my own institution, that will always be seen as a second-class thing. Promotion will always be seen as a research thing. But if you cut that out, you could become somebody who's excellent at inquiry, and that could be in teaching or research.
Yeah.
I think further to that as well, the idea of moving towards a place where you can actually have research-led teaching, or even teaching-led research, because there are so many things you completely around what you said. There's so much synergy there. We're not taking advantage enough. It's all well and good bringing in 3-4-star researchers, but actually, if that isn't trickling down into the way they're distributing it, if they're distributing it at conferences, great. If they're distributing it to teachers, we're doing something right as an institution. It doesn't matter where you are. So it's quite exciting.
It troubles me that people seem to think that it's zero sum, that bringing in good research means pushing out teaching. I think most people feel that the two, like you say, there's nothing anti-teaching in the strategic vision. It's actually very positive about teaching. It's just that there's also been the introduction of the research agenda.
Yeah,
and it's only
recruiting lots of 3-star and 4-star researchers at the moment.
But a lot of them are the best teachers in this institution. I mean, you could go through the Student Voice nominations and you'll see a lot of them are really high-flying researchers.
Although actually, I think you'd be surprised to see how many of those aren't profs.
Yeah.
There was only a few profs.
Yeah, there were. A lot of them weren't the researchers.
A lot of them were people without PhDs too.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of people without PhDs. So
I think it's a perception. I agree with you. The strategic vision isn't saying that, and I think that's an absolutely right point. Should we continue to separate that? And maybe that's why coming up with the city academic would be a better way to go rather than the teaching and learning. And actually, there is a group looking at the promotion routes again, dare I say it, here at the Institution for Academics, but they know about the Change Academy project and they do want the data and some of the information from us. So there is a chance to influence some of those, and it may be, you know, we just have to keep chipping away at that, but maybe we should stop. Yeah, we're looking at this separately, and maybe we should try and encourage there to be more of a joined up area around it. Any
final questions?
I did have one. Are you finding kind of preliminarily that, do you think that the things that you're hearing from students are suggesting that there's a unique context at City in terms of what students want from teaching excellence? Or does it kind of fit with what you know of other institutions and the sector as a whole?
I think there's elements of both, and that's probably not the answer you're looking for. But really, I think essentially there are so many commonalities in the way that you teach. No matter how innovative and different you are from every other teacher, but actually you could transplant the same teaching model into any other institution that could work. I think what we're finding is that the people who are really standing out and shining, we haven't gone into as much depth in the research as we want to do yet. The people who are doing that, there's something about it, and I still don't think it's coming through in the nominations what that is, which is the interesting thing. So in many ways it could be linked to personality. I'm not quite sure. But
I think it's got a lot to do with it.
But I think that raises a really big question in terms of actually, are we recruiting the right people to be teaching?
Well, I actually...
That's on film, isn't it? Oops.
Variety, you know, I mean, some people, you know, you need the knowledge, but, you know, maybe rarely you get the two in one person. That's why, you know.
But it was one of the things that really surprised me when I began to kind of learn the process of how academics and stuff, you know, generally come to teach in university, which is that where, you know, if you're, it seems silly, and please don't shout at me if I've got this wrong, but if you're wanting to teach in a school, then you have to go through quite a thorough process of training and development and various things like that, and a lot of effort and a lot of time goes into that. And then I suddenly realised that a lot of the people, you know, who I was taught by at university might actually have been people who were brilliant in their field, passionate in their field, and who would have made excellent lecturers had they been given maybe a little support to begin with, rather than dumped in front of 300 students saying, you know, now inspire and teach. And that's it's not necessarily an easy thing to accomplish. So I think also giving people the tools as soon as they come in, you know, even if they have an amazing research profile, it's not necessarily the same thing immediately, but it can be learned. But it has to be seen as a key part of what happens when you come in, an important part.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I mean, there is hope for that, because I think it's something that, in particular, that the QA are clamping down on. I don't know whether you've read the report that we got, but now we have this recommendation that we have to make sure that all our PhD students who are teaching have to teach a qualification first. And if that's the stance that the QA are taking in terms of their national stance, then in a few years' time, you'll actually start to see the benefits of that come through, because you're not getting people who've just finished their PhD being let loose on 400 people, because that's pretty intimidating. You're not going to function at your best if you're constantly scared you're going to mess up. You know, and it is about development. And I think we're only just starting to realise that, generally.
You need support.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was going to add to that. I think it's the same kind of idea that part of recognising good teaching then could actually be right from the start. And recruitment, one thing we don't do that most universities does is when we recruit, make someone present a teaching experience as part of, you know, you actually have to present on your research when you recruit here, but you don't have to present on your teaching. And that seems quite an absence of the system.
Do you have like an induction or anything like that when you're teaching?
Well, there's a question. There is an induction to university, and you know, LDC do take part in that. But at the moment, some universities have moved to undertaking a teaching course qualification if you haven't got one compulsory. It still isn't here, but having said that, we're not particularly stressed about that. 1 or 2 schools make it a requirement to do one module or whatever, but we're still getting over 100 people volunteering each year to come on parts of the programme. So in a way, the LDC team would sooner people came because they want to come or because we've been out and talked to them and then think that they want to come. So I think there are varying things about that, but I think it's important people get the support. Thank you.